You lose someone. You buy flowers. You place them by a photograph, or a grave, or a name carved into stone. It feels personal. It feels modern. It feels like something you invented out of love. But you didn't invent it. 60,000 years ago, in a cave in the mountains of northern Iraq, someone did the exact same thing. They laid a body down. They surrounded it with flowers, and then they buried it. The strange part isn't that they mourned. The strange part is who they were. They weren't Homo sapiens. They were Neanderthals. For most of the 20th century, you were taught that Neanderthals were little more than brutish animals, grunting, violent, incapable of anything you'd recognize as feeling. Then, in the 1950s, an archaeologist named Ralph Solecki began excavating a site called Shanidar Cave. In one grave, he found something that shouldn't have been there: clusters of pollen, not scattered randomly, but concentrated, as if bundled. Solecki concluded the body had been buried with flowers. He called it the flower burial. The world called it proof that even our closest evolutionary cousins understood loss. Later, researchers questioned the pollen. Maybe it came from burrowing rodents. Maybe the wind did it. Science argues with itself, the way it should. But even the skeptics couldn't explain away the rest of Shanidar Cave. Bodies placed deliberately, limbs arranged. In some cases, evidence of care extended to individuals who could barely survive on their own. A man with a withered arm, a healed skull fracture, someone who lived for years after an injury that should have killed him. Someone fed him, someone protected him, and when he died, someone buried him too. So ask yourself this: if a species without language as we know it, without art, without agriculture, still took the time to bury their dead with what looks like intention, what does that tell you about grief itself? It tells you grief isn't a cultural invention. It's older than culture. Move forward in time to a site in Russia called Sungir, dated to roughly 34,000 years ago. Archaeologists uncovered 2 children buried head to head, wrapped in thousands of ivory beads. Each bead would have taken hours to carve by hand. Thousands of hours for 2 young lives that were gone. Alongside them, spears made of straightened mammoth tusk, an object so labor-intensive it borders on impossible. This wasn't a quick disposal of a body. This was weeks, maybe months, of collective labor, poured into a farewell. Archaeologist Paul Pettit, who has spent decades studying Paleolithic burial practices, argues that these graves aren't just about honoring the dead. They're about the living. Burial rituals, he suggests, exist to help the community process an absence, to mark that something has changed, to draw a line between the world before the loss and the world after it. That idea might sound modern, a funeral as therapy for the living, not just tribute to the dead. But it's not modern at all. It's ancient. It might be one of the oldest ideas humans have ever had. Here's where it gets stranger, though, because grief might not even be uniquely human. Primatologists have documented chimpanzee mothers carrying the bodies of their dead infants for days, sometimes weeks, grooming them, refusing to put them down even as the body changes. Jane Goodall observed something similar decades ago at Gombe. More recently, comparative psychologist James Anderson has studied cases of chimpanzees gathering around a dying group member, going silent, touching the body gently after death, and then avoiding the place where it happened for a long time afterward. Elephants have been seen returning to the bones of dead herd members, touching the skulls with their trunks. Anthropologist Barbara King, who has written extensively on animal grief, argues that mourning isn't a switch that flips on only in humans. It's a spectrum, and you sit on the far end of a very long evolutionary line. So why does this matter to you? You're not burying a Neanderthal. You're not carving ivory beads for 34,000 hours. You're going to a funeral home, picking a casket from a catalog, writing a card that says, "Sorry for your loss." It matters because the impulse underneath all of it is the same one. You cannot leave the body where it fell. You cannot pretend nothing happened. Something in you needs to mark it, ritualize it, make it visible. Flowers at a Neanderthal grave. Beads on a Paleolithic child. A wreath on a modern door. Different materials. Same instinct. Consider what that instinct is actually doing. A death disrupts the group. It disrupts the pattern everyone relied on. Ritual, any ritual, gives the group something to do with that disruption. It turns chaos into structure. It gives grief a shape, and a shape is something you can survive. Think about what you do the moment you hear devastating news. Do you sit still? Rarely. You move. You call someone. You start making arrangements. You clean something or cook something or organize something that doesn't need organizing. Psychologists who study grief have long noted this pattern of busy morning. The compulsion to act, to do something with your hands while your mind can't process what's happened. That compulsion has a lineage stretching back tens of thousands of years. Back to hands weaving flowers into a grave. Back to hands carving beads by firelight for a child who will never wear them. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For over 99% of the time humans have existed, there was no writing, no photographs, no way to preserve a face or a voice after death. Ritual was the only technology available for memory. Burial was memory. The flowers were memory. The beads were memory. If you didn't ritualize it, it disappeared completely, as if the person had never lived at all. You don't have that problem anymore. You have photographs, videos, voicemails you can't bring yourself to delete, and yet you still hold funerals. You still bring flowers. Why? When the technology for remembering no longer requires it. Because the ritual was never really about preserving information. It was about the living needing a shared moment to say, this mattered. This person mattered. Something is different now, and we are marking that difference together. That need hasn't gone anywhere. It's sitting underneath every condolence card, every candlelight vigil, every moment of silence at a stadium. You think you're honoring the dead. Mostly, you're doing what a Neanderthal did in a cave 60,000 years ago. You're helping each other survive the gap they left behind. So the next time you stand at a funeral or lay flowers somewhere quiet, notice what your body is doing. Notice the urge to touch something, to arrange something, to make the moment feel deliberate instead of random. That urge isn't grief alone. It's grief plus tens of thousands of years of ancestors who felt exactly the same pull and answered it the only way they knew how. You buy flowers. You place them by a photograph or a grave or a name carved into stone. It doesn't feel modern anymore, does it? It feels like the oldest thing you've ever done.